Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, let's jump in. In the quiet dark of space, a small alien vessel floated, its scanners sweeping the stars in long, careful pulses. At first, it was just routine. Another system, another set of signals. But then, something strange appeared on their sensors. A lone human ship, silent, unmoving, yet radiating an energy signature that didn't make sense. The alien crew leaned in, curious. The ship's name blinked on their display in plain, earthborn letters. Mercy. It looked peaceful. No weapons aimed, no shields raised, just drifting in the cold. One officer even laughed. Mercy? Is that what they call warships now? But their scans kept going. And as the data returned, no one laughed anymore. This wasn't some weak, wandering vessel. Mercy wasn't a symbol of peace. It was a fortress, a machine wrapped in mystery and madness. Its outer hull, smooth and polished, was made of material unknown to the galactic order. It didn't reflect light. It swallowed it. Its energy core pulsed with rhythms that felt wrong, like a heartbeat with too many chambers. The longer they scanned it, the more their systems began to fail. Instruments cracked, screens glitched. The ship's presence alone was enough to break their tools. This wasn't a ship. It was a message. You looked at Mercy and thought it meant forgiveness. But you were wrong. It was justice, waiting to be delivered. The alien vessel began to pull back, its scanners still trailing across the surface of the human warship. But something wasn't right. The deeper they looked into Mercy, the more confused their systems became. Their data logs, normally clear and structured, now flickered with static, as if the ship they were analyzing didn't want to be understood. The high commander of the vessel, a seasoned tactician named Relva, watched as each new report came in, each one more impossible than the last. This ship defies protocol, one technician whispered. It doesn't respond like a craft. It's behaving more like a mind. Relva didn't flinch, but inside, his nerves curled. Mercy wasn't firing. It hadn't moved. It hadn't spoken. But its silence was deafening. And that silence carried a weight. He ordered a halt to the scans. Back off. Now. But the system didn't respond. The ship's sensors were locked in, feeding looped data, as if Mercy had taken hold of their own vessel and refused to let go. Then, without warning, their communications array screamed. Raw static bursting into their minds. The signal wasn't a voice, not at first. It was a sound like metal tearing across metal. Then a shape formed across their main screen. A diagram of Mercy's weapons layout. Not a warning. A lesson. A display of capability. One of the younger crew members gasped. If that ship fired, we wouldn't just lose this vessel. We'd be erased. Instantly. Relva didn't answer. He was too focused on the layout. It wasn't the size of the guns or the shape of the hull. It was the intent. Mercy had weapons that no civilization had reported seeing before. Orbital fold projectors, gravitational spike fields, and deep-core missiles designed not to destroy ships, but undo them. Weapons that didn't just rip metal apart, they tore through reality itself. The implications settled over the bridge like a thick fog. If Mercy had been designed to fight the standard warships of the Galactic Union, It would have been excessive. Overkill. But these weren't war tools. They were survival tools. Every weapon system was engineered to adapt, to evolve. Its cannons recalibrated in real time. Its armor repurposed itself to reflect different frequencies of attack. It had defensive countermeasures that reacted before being fired upon, as if it was reading the battlefield a second ahead of time. This ship hadn't been built to conquer other species. It had been built to stand alone, and that realization hit like a cold wind. They had always assumed the humans were brash, short-lived creatures, always expanding, always fighting, always needing more. But if that was true, why had they stopped expanding years ago? Why had their fleets grown larger but stayed within the same borders? Why had their colonies gone silent? It wasn't cowardice. It was preparation. Mercy wasn't a tool of war. It was a barricade, a shield, a last resort. And for something like this to exist, it meant humanity had seen the end. They had looked into the dark and come back changed. Relva's breath was shallow now, his thoughts racing far beyond the mission. The Union had always treated humans as a lesser power. Aggressive, yes. Reckless, sometimes. But not a serious threat. The Union had focused its attention on the great empires, the ones with long histories, vast fleets, and generations of strategy behind them. And yet, somehow, the humans had moved forward without them noticing. Quietly, efficiently. They had built ships that could fight on their own, ships like Mercy. And that name, Mercy, it was starting to make sense now. Not a name born of compassion, but of choice. The kind of mercy you grant before delivering the final blow. Or the kind you offer to a dying world before it's swallowed whole. "Sir," the navigation officer whispered, "should we withdraw?" Relva's gaze stayed locked on the warship outside the viewport. It hadn't moved. It still hadn't aimed. But it had let them see. It had let them understand. And he realized with growing horror, that was the point. They were allowed to see, allowed to scan, allowed to leave, because someone wanted them to tell the others. Not because humanity was afraid. No, not that. Mercy didn't act out of fear. It was a warning shot made of silence, a final chance. Relva swallowed hard. The question bloomed in his mind, sharp and clear. What could scare a species enough to make them build this? The records in their data archives told stories of old threats, fading empires, artificial plagues, rogue AI. But nothing had ever required something like this. Not just one ship, but a fleet of them. Each like Mercy, silent, watching, waiting. And humans, once so eager to spread their reach across the stars, now stood their ground like they were expecting a storm so massive, so unforgiving, that even the mighty Union would crumble under it. If the humans hadn't created Mercy, what would have happened? That answer was as clear as it was terrifying. They'd be gone. Not defeated, not conquered, just gone. Wiped out like data from a broken file. Because Mercy wasn't built to win a war. It was built to delay the inevitable. Relva stood from his chair, his claws clicking on the metal floor. "Prepare the jump drive. We're leaving." The crew hesitated. "But we haven't collected full readings." "We've collected enough," he snapped. This isn't just a new human warship. It's a signal. They didn't stop us because they couldn't catch us. They let us go. They want us to tell the others. He walked to the front of the command deck, his eyes never leaving the massive black ship floating just beyond their reach. The humans are preparing for something worse than us, he said quietly. Something we don't even have a name for yet. But whatever it is, they're building mercy to face it. One of the younger officers whispered, "Do you think they'll survive?" Relva didn't answer, because in truth, that wasn't the question anymore. The real question was whether anyone else could. The stars streaked past as the alien vessel tore through the void, its jump drive pulling it far from the system where it had first encountered the human ship. But distance didn't help. Not really. Because the image of Mercy, silent, still, and terrifying, had carved itself into every crew member's mind. No one spoke. No one dared break the silence. The ship had vanished from their sensors the moment the jump completed, but its presence lingered like a shadow behind their eyes. High Commander Relva remained on the bridge, not seated, but standing in rigid stillness, staring at the blank expanse outside the viewport. His thoughts weren't on their route. They weren't even on his mission. They were on that ship. He had never seen anything like it. He had seen dreadnoughts larger than small moons, battle cruisers that could erase continents, scout ships that vanished into stealth fields so perfect even gravity forgot they were there. But none of those compared to what he saw today. Because Mercy didn't just represent power, it represented intent. And that was the part that frightened him most. After they made the jump, Relva had ordered the data logs decrypted and displayed on the main holotable in the center of the bridge. Dozens of holograms rose like ghosts in the dark. Schematics, partial readings, energy mappings. All of it was fragmented, degraded by the interference from the ship's proximity. But enough came through. More than enough. "Begin playback," he ordered. The AI filtered through the scrambled files and projected the ship's shape again. Mercy, rendered in full. Her silhouette was sleek but heavy, a design that balanced grace and brutality. At first glance, she looked like any other long-range battleship. Armored hull, heavy turrets, large thrusters. But as the layers unfolded, Relva saw what made her different. The outer hull was woven, not built, but braided, from a composite of self-healing alloys and dark energy absorbers. Any projectile, any beam that touched it, didn't reflect or burst. It disappeared. Some parts of the hull actually shimmered in a way that suggested spatial distortion, like the ship wasn't fully anchored in normal space. "This isn't just metal," muttered one of the engineers. "It's like they wrapped the ship in a reactive skin." Relva nodded grimly, because they're not trying to survive hits. They're trying to never be hit twice by the same thing. And inside the hull, that's where the nightmare truly lived. Beneath the armor was an engine core that pulsed with irregular surges. It didn't burn like most reactors. It throbbed, as if alive. The energy readings shifted constantly, changing frequency every few seconds. At first, they thought it was camouflage or shielding, until the truth came out. "It's not masking its energy," the tech officer said. "It's broadcasting false signatures, dozens at once. Anyone trying to lock onto it with weapons would be targeting ghosts." Then came the weapons. The hologram lit up with red and orange tags, each one a turret, a cannon, a missile bank. Every part of Mercy was armed. Every angle had coverage, from the bow to the aft. There wasn't a single spot that wasn't built to fight. But these weren't ordinary weapons. The main guns? Rail lances that fired slugs at near light speed, so fast they could punch through a mountain and still have energy to spare. The secondary systems? Plasma filaments that burned through shielding like fire through dry leaves. And then there were the missiles. Thousands of them, stored in internal launch bays. Each one wrapped in tech the Union had never seen. Micro-warp drives, shield disruptors, gravitational inverters, and their payloads, well, those weren't designed to explode in the traditional sense. One report simply said, impact collapses target space, shielding irrelevant, armor collapses into itself. But perhaps the worst systems were the ones built not to fight other ships, but their crews. Internal boarding pods, Relva said quietly. Why would a ship need those unless it planned to go inside enemy vessels? The data confirmed it. Mercy housed hunter drones with monomolecular blades, viral hacking tools, nanite storms. These were not tools of Mercy. These were surgical weapons meant to erase life from within. They're building ships that don't just win battles, Relva muttered. They're building ships that leave nothing behind. One of the younger officers whispered, but why name it Mercy? The question sat in the air for a moment. Relva didn't answer immediately. He looked back at the display, eyes scanning the structure, the layers, the design. Then softly, he spoke. Because someone in their high command, maybe a tactician or a fleet architect, someone realized what they were doing. They knew this ship wasn't just a war machine. It was a reflection of a choice. He stepped closer to the holotable, his claw tracing the outline of the ship's nameplate, now magnified by the scan data. There it was, etched into the side of the vessel in dark iron. MERCY. It's not a name, he said. It's a message. Another officer turned toward him. You think they're trying to scare us? No, Relva said. I think they're trying to warn us. A long silence followed. The ship, even in holographic form, felt heavy in the room. No one moved. And in that silence, the realization finally struck them. Not just what Mercy was, but what she meant. The humans had seen something, faced something, and they had built this, not to show dominance, not to intimidate, but because they didn't have another choice. Mercy wasn't for us, Relva thought. It's for them. Whatever they fought, whatever made them build this, it scared them enough to stop growing, stop expanding, and start digging in. And if the humans were scared, then the rest of the galaxy was already too late. The warship Mercy was terrifying enough on its own, but for High Commander Relva, it wasn't just the weapons, or the armor, or the shifting, unnatural energy signature that haunted him. It was the silence. Not the kind that fills empty space. Space always had a hum. Background radiation, comm signals, debris scans, echoes of stars long gone. No, this silence was different. It was strategic, intentional, and that's what made it unbearable. Humans weren't talking, not to the Union, not to the other species, not even to their own allies. Their transmissions had grown increasingly short over the past few decades, tight, encrypted, nearly emotionless. And while their diplomats still attended the required galactic councils, they said almost nothing of consequence. Polite, cold, distant, they had become ghosts in plain sight. Relva stared at the fleet reports from the Union's central database. His ship's AI had already compiled cross-reference patterns across human military logs, trade records, and fleet positions over the last 20 years. The picture it painted chilled him. Humanity's territory had stopped growing. No new colonies. No major expansion efforts. Their mining fleets didn't venture into new systems. They just stripped existing ones down with ruthless efficiency. Their colonists no longer asked for aid or resources. Everything had turned inward. And most concerning of all, their ships kept multiplying. Each year, more appeared. More warships, more patrols, more Black Ops signals moving through deep space. They weren't building trade ships or science vessels anymore. No new exploration cruisers, no civilian transports, just steel, guns, armor, silence. Relva's eyes shifted to the most recent chart, a classified satellite sweep of Earth's outer defense grid. Hundreds of orbital platforms hung above the cradle of humanity, like a storm frozen mid-motion, each bristling with weaponry, shield arrays, and command relays, each built for one purpose: to buy time. That was the only thing that made sense now. Humanity wasn't just preparing for war. They weren't even trying to win one. They were building to survive. "This doesn't match any standard doctrine," muttered his chief strategist. "Not for conquest, not for defense against known enemies." "Because it's not for us," Relva replied, voice low. He pulled up another set of files. Incidents from the fringe. Vessels lost without a trace. Sectors suddenly blacked out. Whole outposts gone dark. For decades, these events had been labeled as pirate activity or systemic collapse. But now, he saw them for what they were: tests, encounters, probes into the void. He called up another file, one buried deep in Union archives. A human freighter, Dawning Star, had sent a distress call from a deep space mining route 53 years ago. The signal was garbled, nearly unreadable. The few words that came through were nonsense at the time. "They woke it. We weren't ready. Do not follow. They—" The message ended in static. Relva magnified the final transmission's background noise. It wasn't truly noise. There was rhythm, a pulse, a pattern. The same rhythmic wave they detected from Mercy's power core. A memory returned. One of the human officers in a council meeting, decades ago, quietly slipping a report into the Galactic Intelligence database. A report no one had read. Too busy, too political, too many agendas. But it was there, warning them, telling them. The humans had known something was coming. Maybe they didn't know exactly what. Maybe they hadn't understood it fully themselves. But they had seen the signs. And instead of telling the galaxy, they had turned inward. Relva's mind raced. Humans had always been a volatile species, chaotic, impulsive. But they weren't stupid. They knew the Union wouldn't believe them without proof. Proof they couldn't afford to get. So they did the only thing they could. They prepared in silence. They stopped colonizing not because they lacked ambition, but because they couldn't afford to spread themselves thin. They stopped expanding not because they were weak, but because they knew they needed to hold the line. And they built warships, like mercy, not for glory or conquest, but because one day something was going to come out of the dark, and they intended to meet it head on. Sir, the ship's AI broke the silence. We've completed predictive analysis on human fleet construction patterns. Relva turned toward the console. Show me. A grid unfolded before him. A web of human-controlled space. Dotted lines showed shipyards, military hubs, refueling depots. But more importantly, they showed intent. There was no expansion, but there was preparation. Each colony reinforced. Each planet defended. Every orbital yard arranged like layers of a trap. They've built a fortress, Relva said quietly. Not a civilization. And the center of that fortress? Earth, or as the humans now called it in their internal transmissions, Terra Bastion. A homeworld turned into a fortress world. How long had they been building this? 50 years? Longer. He zoomed into one of the shipyards near Alpha Centauri, codenamed Forge Tenebris. The specs from a stolen Union scan revealed a fleet of nearly 200 heavy-class vessels being constructed, at a pace twice that of any other galactic power. Who's funding this? Asked the strategist. They don't have the resources. They're sacrificing everything else, Relva said. Science, article diplomacy, trade. They're turning every credit into steel. Another pause. Another file flickered open. Project Sentinel Wing. Relva's breath caught. This wasn't just a ship class. It was a new breed. One designed to operate without crews. AI-driven, self-replicating field generators, meant for defense lines where no human dared go, where even mercy might fall. His stomach turned. The humans weren't planning to retake lost territory. They were preparing for the day when they would be the last line of defense. Why didn't they warn us? His second-in-command asked again. Relva finally answered. Because they didn't think we'd believe them. Or worse, they didn't think we could do anything about it. That thought sank in. Heavy. Terrible. If the humans didn't trust the rest of the galaxy to help, it meant whatever they'd seen was beyond politics, beyond alliances. It wasn't something you bargained with. It was something that came in the night and took everything. He stared once more at the frozen image of Mercy, still pulled up on the display. A ship built to hold the line, to die buying time, to warn the rest of the galaxy if it was still listening. And most of them weren't. Relva stood alone in the observation deck of his vessel, staring out into the expanse. The stars glittered like frozen memories, distant and cold, but no light could warm the weight settling in his chest. He had seen enough. Mercy was not built to fight other species. It was built to stand against something else, something unseen, unnamed, and until recently, unknown. But now the shadows were beginning to form shape. The encrypted files retrieved from the Central Union Archive still buzzed with incomplete data. Fragmented logs, deep space recordings, ghost signals. But beneath the static and scrambled feeds, a pattern had emerged. They all pointed to one region, Sector E94, once listed as uninhabited and without resources. A dead zone. A place of no value. And yet, humanity had locked it behind classified walls for decades. Relva opened the last known scan taken from the edge of that sector. The image appeared slowly, pixels dragging across the display like reluctant truths. Wreckage everywhere. Twisted metal, fractured hulls, debris fields spanning hundreds of kilometers, not from one species, but from dozens. Ships with unknown markings, materials that didn't match anything on the galactic periodic table. Vessel, designs that made no logical sense, some organic, some crystalline, some mechanical, in ways that defied standard engineering. This wasn't a battlefield. It was a graveyard. And what was worse, among the remains, faint signals pulsed. Faint, but active. "Commander," came a voice over comms. "We've completed the forensic pass. No known species match the wreckage. Some of it dates back millennia." Millennia. That meant whatever destroyed these ships had been out there longer than most civilizations had existed. The image shifted again. A recording from a long-range probe, unmanned, heavily shielded. Its last transmission had been intercepted by human relays nearly 40 years ago. The footage began silent, slow, drifting through the dead sector. At first, it showed only debris, floating quietly, shards of hulls, broken spires, the remains of engines that still shimmered with faint radiation. Then the movement, barely noticeable. A chunk of wreckage that began to drift against the current. Another shadow, impossibly large, blocking stars in the distance. And then it unfolded. Relva froze as he watched the screen. A massive structure, layered in jagged armor that twisted like it had grown, not been built. It shimmered with something between metal and flesh. Pulses of light flickered beneath its surface, like a circulatory system in something that should not have been alive. Appendages, arms, claws, extended slowly from its sides. Some moved with machine precision. Others twitched with an unsettling organic rhythm. As it drifted forward, the probe's image shuddered. Not from impact, from interference, from presence. Then came the noise. A screech, not of metal, not of technology. Something deeper, lower. A vibration that passed through the probe's shielding and directly into the audio feed. It wasn't meant for ears. It was meant for minds. The probe's camera cut out 5 seconds later. The last frame, a long, spindled shape reaching toward the lens, not with aggression, but with curiosity, like it was studying a new prey. And then, darkness. Relva stood motionless. Even the ship's ambient hum felt too loud now. "What is it?" his second officer asked, staring wide-eyed at the paused footage. Relva answered without turning. "Something old. Something that's not supposed to be here anymore." He opened a secure channel to his private terminal and retrieved the deepest, most encrypted file taken from humanity's black data vault. A file labeled simply Erebus. There was no author, no timestamp, no official seal. Only a description, written in short, brutal sentences. "We did not find them. They found us. They don't conquer. They consume." No communication, no negotiation. Biomechanical, adaptive, hostile to all life. No identified homeworld, mobile fleets only. We have seen what happens when they reach a core world. Nothing remains. That was the truth humanity had buried. That was the reason they built ships like Mercy. not to fight other species, but to hold the line against something that devours civilizations like fire through dry leaves. And the most disturbing line? Estimated time to full arrival, unknown, encounters increasing, contact inevitable. Inevitable. Relva closed the file and leaned on the console, breathing hard. His claws tapped nervously on the metal edge. Humanity had been preparing for this for decades, maybe longer. And what had the rest of the galaxy done? Mocked them, ignored them, focused on borders, trade routes, power games. Meanwhile, just beyond the veil of explored space, something had been watching, learning, feeding. He pulled up another map, the human fleet placements near Sector E-94. They weren't randomized patrols. They were containment lines. Every ship, every orbital platform, every sensor satellite. It was all part of a massive effort to slow down whatever was lurking beyond, not to stop it. That was the most sobering truth of all. The humans didn't believe it could be stopped, only delayed. "Commander," came a soft voice from the communications station. "There's been a new signal, human origin, encoded transmission, directed to Union High Command." Relva turned. "Play it." The voice that emerged was calm, but firm. Human. Male. Probably military. "To any Union vessels monitoring this frequency, do not approach Sector E-94. You are not prepared. If you have seen mercy, then you understand. This is not your war. Yet. But if you enter that sector unannounced, you risk making it your extinction. Humanity is not your enemy, but we do stand between you and the dark." The message ended. Relva's heart thundered in his chest. They do not want help. They want us to stay out of the way. But what if the thing out there didn't care about containment? What if one day it slipped past humanity's lines? No species would be ready, except the humans, because they had already seen what was coming. And the question now wasn't whether Erebus would return, it was when. The galaxy had been warned. Not by grand speeches, not by declarations at the Union's ivory halls, and not by fleets lined up at the borders. It had been warned by silence, by a warship called Mercy, by humans who had stopped expanding, who had stopped speaking, who had started digging in, and by a single message broadcast once and once only. We are not your enemies, but we are the wall. If we fall, there is no second line. High Commander Relva stood in the council chamber of the Royan Dominion, the same chamber where, not long ago, war had been whispered against humanity, where Relva had once argued for containment, for caution. Now, those same warlords sat in breathless silence, watching what he had brought them. The final proof, the Erebus. The footage played across the war table's projection dome. A massive creature ship drifting into view, its hull alive with pulsing tendrils, as if it breathed in vacuum. Around it, the remains of a Royan scout fleet hung in still silence, ships sliced open, hollowed, drifting like bones. The Erebus ship didn't move like a vessel. It stalked. The council sat frozen as another segment began, human warships engaging it. It was a different Erebus ship now, or perhaps the same one in another form. The humans fought hard. Mercy was at the front. Its railguns howled in silence, punching gravitational warheads into the enemy's flesh-like armor. Missiles curved through space in tight, precise spirals. Boarding pods shot through space like daggers. But it wasn't enough. Every time they damaged the Erebus ship, it adapted, changed form, rearranged its armor, disassembled weapons, and rebuilt them into something new, even more brutal. Relva spoke. They're not fighting a war. They're studying one. Torval, the grand warlord of the Dominion, exhaled deeply, his voice dry. What are they? Relva answered without hesitation. They are extinction, not a fleet, not a nation, a tide. They don't invade. They erase. We are not dealing with conquerors. We are dealing with something far worse. And humanity? Another warlord asked, almost ashamed. Relva turned his gaze toward them, burning now with iron certainty. They were never our enemy. They've been the shield between us and the void, and that shield is breaking. No one argued after that. 3 days later, a fleet of 3,000 ships left Royan Prime, heading straight for Terra. They weren't going to invade. They were going to stand with them. From the burned moons of the Talari, from the floating archives of Zunkar, from the crystalline suns of the Zora clans, they came. Ships of every shape and size, crews of every color, voice, and legacy, all headed toward one place, Terra. The humans received them in silence. No trumpets, no parades, just silent orbital stations blinking clearance codes, guiding each ship into position. By the time Relva arrived in his own dreadnought, over 20,000 vessels hung in orbit around Earth. He saw Mercy again, floating in the heart of it all, still, watching, waiting. But it wasn't alone anymore. Other human ships flanked her, sister vessels, Resolve, Bastion, Vow, Ashes, each forged in silence, each bearing the names of hard choices. When Relva landed on the surface, he was greeted not by generals, but by a man in a black command coat. Captain Elias Grant, the face behind the voice that had warned them all. Relva extended a clawed hand. Grant took it without hesitation. Too late to run now, Relva said quietly. We were never going to run, Grant replied. They met in the war room of Orbital Command Theta, an enormous chamber carved into the side of Earth's exosphere overlooking the planet. Everyone important was there. Human commanders, Royan tacticians, Zunkari, AI interfaces, even a few species who had sworn to never set foot on Terra again. But all of that was behind them now. All that mattered was what came next. Captain Grant stood before the central hollow table, its curved projection showing the edge of human space. Red markers blinked across the screen. Then more and more. They've breached the E-94 containment line, Grant said. We lost the Resolute and her sister fleet 8 hours ago. What's their trajectory? A Talari priest commander asked. Grant's jaw tightened. Everywhere. The projection zoomed out. Paths lit up. Invasion patterns, but they weren't linear. The Erebus weren't following trade routes or supply lines. They moved like a virus, seeping, splitting, infecting from all directions. One thing was clear. There would be no single front, no glorious stand. It would be chaos, fire, shadows, death. Unless they made it not so. We can't win in space, Grant said. We never could. Our ships buy time. nothing more. He pointed to the outer rings of defensive positions. We slow them, hit and vanish, keep them away from our worlds as long as we can. Relva stepped forward. And when they break through? Grant's eyes were cold now. Then we take the fight to the ground. They came without light. Not ships. Not in the way the galaxy understood them. They looked like holes in space. The Erebus tore through reality like knives through fabric. One by one, their dark vessels bled through the stars, and the war began. Mercy was the first to fire. Her railguns screamed through the silence of space, splitting vacuum and flesh metal apart in brilliant streaks of white-hot light. The Erebus answered with silence, and then power. Not energy, but entropy. Ships began dissolving in mid-flight. Armor turned brittle. Engines simply stopped. Thousands died in seconds, but the lines held. Relva's fleet formed a defensive wall over Terra, trading blows at impossible range. The Talari sun harvesters flared bright with solar fire. The Zora crystal cores pulsed, sending gravity shocks across enemy flanks. And the humans kept fighting. Their drones swarmed like hornets. Their missile fields tore through the first wave. And Mercy, she burned. She was struck, pierced, torn. But she did not fall. They fought for 3 days. On the 4th, the Erebus breached the inner line. They made it to Earth's atmosphere. One reached low orbit, began unraveling the sky itself, a warping field that bent clouds into glass. Then something happened. From the dark side of the planet, a new signal rose. One last weapon, not a ship, not a cannon, a beacon. Humanity's last plan, not to destroy, but to draw all Erebus ships to one place. A sacrifice. And Mercy was the bait. She transmitted the signal, loud, blinding. The Erebus turned, hundreds of them. They swarmed her. Relva watched as Mercy lit up the sky one final time. She did not run. She did not plead. She opened her weapons, bared her core, and detonated. The explosion tore through reality like a scream, a white-hot flash that swallowed the enemy in a wave of collapsing space. And then, silence, real silence. Not empty, not fearful, but peaceful. They found her remains weeks later, still orbiting the dead zone. Just a spine of metal. One wing. Burned words barely visible. The war wasn't over. The Erebus would return. But in that moment, the galaxy had learned something simple. Humanity hadn't been the threat. They had been the shield. And though Mercy fell, she had delivered justice. The kind born not from vengeance, but from sacrifice, from the will to stand when no one else would, from the belief that some things must be protected, even at the cost of everything. And that, perhaps, was the final message of her name. Not forgiveness, not peace, but the choice to fight, so others could live.